Well, with the suggestion of my daughter Caitlin, who highly recommended his class that she took a couple years back, I have invited Dr. Mike Kaufman, Professor Emeritus from MSU Entomology Department, and I believe still involved in some fashion with the department through Dr. Newman's lab. But he's agreed to come and talk to us a little bit about mosquito biology, since we have had some questions with the most recent abundance of mosquitoes that we're experiencing. So, Dr. Mike, if you would care to just jump right in, give us a little background, maybe.
Sure. So I'm not. First of all, I'll apologize in advance if I go into too much detail on things, but I've been with the Department of Entomology for quite a long time, including receiving my PhD there. And I didn't always work on mosquitoes. I think I got into those in the 90s, for example, looking at some really basic larval biology stuff. But through my career, I've dealt with basic biology and mosquito control issues, and I was on advisory boards for some of the mosquito control districts in Michigan and elsewhere. So I've had quite a bit of experience, and like you mentioned, I taught medical entomology and some other courses too, and I've also spoken to neighborhood groups, like yours. So it's not exactly a novel thing. And I guess I've heard you've got a crop of new mosquitoes that are bothering you and are considering control efforts, or is that the basis for this?
There's been a general discussion about ticks and mosquitoes and mowing techniques, and we've been talking about wetlands and natural landscaping for many months. And this topic was a hot one, obviously, with the mosquito season approaching. But I'll let Bruce add anything to that, or if anybody else wants to chime in. Normally, we have just an open conversation about topics of interest, and this one emerged. And then through our networks, social networks, we often invite speakers to give a more to shed their expertise on us occasionally. So
I'll help in any way I can. I guess I'm thinking that I will be answering your questions if I can, right? So
sounds like a plan. If you have a question, you can raise your hand or just unmute yourself and speak up.
I think one of the questions we have in general is just the idea of with the mosquitoes that we have in the area, like one of the things that was stated earlier a couple of weeks ago was that East Lansing wasn't necessarily as bad. Is that around us, or is the wetlands actually helping us? And just the idea of like, if we go out and try to do mosquito spray, is that actually just making it worse by, is it because it's maybe affecting the wetlands, just like that whole, just how all that works, if we have neighbors who are spraying, is it actually helping, or is it just making it worse because it's affecting the whole ecosystem?
So I'm not sure I'll be able to answer all of that, but it depends a little bit on how they're spraying and what they're using. Technically, they're not supposed to be spraying directly on wetlands if they're using a adulticide. So with very few exceptions along those lines. Normally, if you're So as far as I understand, East Lansing, Okemos doesn't have like a, district-wide mosquito control. So neighborhoods like yours contract out to Rose Pest Control or whatever, is potentially handling things, and they treat it on almost a house by house basis, right? I don't know. I mean, maybe there are other options for you for, widespread spraying, but to my knowledge, that doesn't happen. And if there is something along the lines of, broader control, for example, how they practice things in Bay County and Saginaw County, where, trucks go through the neighborhood and kind of, fog the areas in the evenings and other things like that. Normally, they don't necessarily target wetlands, with this very important exception. So there are kind of two approaches to mosquito control, and broadly speaking, and one of them targets the larval stage. So that would be something that, would be applied to wetlands. And I think Bruce in his email brought this up. There's a really effective biological control for mosquito larvae, Bacillus thuringiensis, variety israelensis, and there are some other bacterial formulations. And you can apply those directly to the breeding sites, to the, if you have, not necessarily all wetlands are great, but if you have, the example I usually give, if you have like a woodland pond, in your area that, is temporary or, semi-permanent, those are often your sources of mosquitoes. And in the Lansing, East Lansing, Okemos area, believe me, the sources of your nuisance mosquitoes are almost always from those types of habitats, kind of temporary flooded things, ponds that form along floodplain areas, or in again, I just think of, walking through the woods and you see kind of a, woodland pond, right, with, trees and tree trunks in it. And those are really heavy producers of at least mosquitoes that come out this year. And then there's some other spots that are temporary flooded areas that also, produce them. Anyway, so again, forgive me for going into too much detail, but these are the types of places that people look for. If you can identify those areas and treat those with Bacillus thuringiensis products early enough, before obviously they develop into adults, then that has a great potential for muting, the mosquitoes that come in. So again, I don't know about your neighborhood or whatever, but that's always the first strategy, and that's exactly what strategies are used in Bay County, Saginaw County. They actually apply this stuff via helicopter and aircraft. So they're spraying, bacteria around, bacterial spores around that are, it sounds dangerous, but they're really specific for mosquitoes and similar organisms. So that's one stage. And so you would be hitting oh, sorry, is there another?
Oh, just a question. Is that something available to us? I know in my backyard, because of all the development, we have some now ponds of standing water. When it rains, it stays there for a good week, becomes a real problem. Is that something I could purchase and use? And is it safe ecologically for everything else?
Yeah, so there are varieties. They used to sell these in what were called dunks, or little donut-sized things you threw into a pond, and then the bacterial spores disperse from that. So there are things you could, honestly, I'm sorry, I haven't looked in places like Home Depot and things recently, but they used to be available to the general public. And again, if you lived in Saginaw, you could go to the mosquito control office and pick them up yourself and do that. So
could we just get a listing, just because I'm uninitiated in this area, just
sure.
Describing or listing it with any information about possible sources? If that's not available, at least the list of that.
Yeah, I'll try to, maybe I can come up with something. I've got versions of PowerPoints and things with, all
Sure.
of these things in it. But again, my research was not specifically into mosquito control, but I know a fair amount about it. So anyway, yes, you can do this. And then to answer the second part of your question, it's not, maybe not the perfect, it's almost the ideal in mosquitocidal compound because it targets mosquito larvae. There are a few other insects that if they ingest this stuff, they will suffer mortality as well, but they're usually nuisance type mosquitoes, but way less than, say, the chemicals that they spray for adults, which are very broad spectrum insecticides. This is the Bacillus thuringiensis are really targeted at least this subgroup of different insects. So it's one of the best, and it's basically non-toxic to other organisms. And people throw it in horse troughs, for example, to control mosquitoes. And I mean, I'm not sure I would drink it myself, but just because of the taste, but but it technically should be, it's harmless to other organisms. It very specifically targets mosquitoes and similar different.
I wonder if, are some insecticides worse than others? Our Parks Department told us they use something called Delta whatever. And the second question is,
probably Delta methrin. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, and I'm wondering if that's, are there some worse than others? The second question is, really you can have like bird bath, right? That's standing water. Is even stuff that small an issue, or that's just don't worry about it?
Yeah, so I guess I'll answer the second part first. I think Bruce brought this up about emptying your bird baths and cleaning out your gutters and taking care of there's actually a fair amount of larval habitat around your homes. Depends on what you deal with, but it actually has. So it's a two-part thing. I think you should do it. You should clean out your bird baths and things. It'll reduce the mosquito burden a little bit, and furthermore, it kind of targets the West Nile vectors. So the type of mosquito that breeds in those habitats tends. I mean, there are other ones that breed in it too, but if you're worried about West Nile, you have West Nile going through your area, then bird baths are one of the better things for. They like to breed in those type of habitats. So go ahead and do it. I think it's a great idea. But the nuisance mosquitoes that are hitting you now and most of the summer, nothing to do with bird baths. So you could get rid of those, empty it, and I think it's a good idea, and from disease prevention and that sort of thing. But almost certainly they're coming from these ponds I described, or flooded field areas, and they can come in from a reasonable distance, like half mile away. It depends on the species. Some of them can come in from 6 miles away. So there's a lot of again, most of them are going to be in and around your neighborhood, but they're not necessarily in your backyard or even in your neighbor's backyard. The ones that bother me, I mean, I live in a rural area around Charlotte, and I think the closest ones that I would like to throw BTI, the Bacillus things, into is like a half mile away, and I know they're and last year I got nailed. It was just incredible. It's the worst I can remember. I mean, I thought about spraying my yard for mosquito control last year, and again they're coming from they can come from a relative distance. Again, I'm not sure about your neighborhood and things, but if you've identified ponds and stuff in the area, and you intercept them at the larval stage, then you could probably reduce, some of that. But anyway, back to the bird baths. Okay, so yes, do that. But remember also, are you guys in an area where you have curb and gutter storm drain systems? Are you? Okay, so you have, things that we used to lose our softballs in or whatever. Those are great breeding sites for some of the including the West Nile vector or whatever. They can produce a lot of things. So there are things that are around that you may not think of, right? You know, to take care of. But again, the nuisance mosquito stuff are mainly from these flooded, you know, temporary flooded ponds and things like that. Okay, so back to the deltamethrin question. So some of them, let's see, some of them are, they're all the ones that use it for mosquito control that I'm aware of now, at least, are almost always in a category they call pyrethroids or synthetic pyrethroids, and they're derived from compounds from chrysanthemums. So they're, you know, a botanical, you know, a natural botanical originally, but they've been modified, you know, and synthesized or whatever. And there are many versions of them, and they all are, you know, low toxicity for mammals, you know, fairly effective against, you know, basically all insects. And it depends on the formulation, you know, specific compound in the formulation as to, you know, whether they last, you know, for a while, whether you spray them and then they kind of, you know, degrade in a couple of days, that sort of thing. So the acute danger, unless you're like drinking the concentrated, you know, product, is not really an issue. Some of them are not as good for cats. You know, you don't want to, if you have a lot of cats or whatever, then, you know, be careful with whatever you're using, and if you're letting them out in the yard. I mean, they're not as, if veterinarians supplies use them, same sorts of things for flea and tick control in some cases, and you can't use them on cats. So there, you know, there's some, you know, minor, I'd say minor issues with some of them, but most of them are just very, very low mammalian, you know, and bird, you know, toxicity. So you don't have to worry about, you know, most of them if they're applying the proper compound in the proper dose and all that sort of thing. So that comes down. On the other hand, I mentioned you can't throw these into the water. Fish tend to be susceptible to some of them, and other, you know, aquatic organisms, you know, don't do well. And again, they're broad spectrum insecticides. So if you don't apply them properly or at the proper time, you know, you could be, you know, wiping out your bees and your butterflies and all that stuff too. But most of them, if they're applied properly, you can avoid, you know, most of those effects. So I'm sorry, I don't I don't know if that helped or not, but maybe I can provide Bruce with some more, a list of items or something like that, then maybe I can, you know, throw those in there too. But anyway, sorry, did I go too far? Okay.
This is great information. One of the things that inspired the conversation too was a question asked by someone who's not here today about whether we should consider that community-wide spraying of BT, as you mentioned, and would that be better than everyone doing their own thing in their yard? Or is there some in-between suggestion that we might contemplate as neighborhoods or as a community?
Yeah, that's always a tough one. So I've worked with, actually my girlfriend lives in Okemos, and she does tick work, by the way. So, you know, I have to get her, you know, call. You want to talk about ticks? Anyway, yeah. So her neighborhood association, you know, goes through this every year, and you know, they usually get just tired of the mosquitoes, and so they have somebody come in and do what they call a barrier spray, which is something they lay down, and it lasts for a little longer than, you know, a lot of the other sprays. And they spray it on places where mosquitoes rest, and it's fairly effective, you know. And they're also, you can opt out of that, you know, if you're an individual neighbor. So there are ways to do that, you know, going forward. But the application of BTI, sorry, that's the Bacillus thuringiensis bacterial compound. BTI is the bacterial stuff. That you know, people will do that, but you've already missed the window. You know, So that needs to be applied in many cases. There's a bunch of mosquitoes that come out in the spring. So you need to actually hit the larval habitats in April, so you've got those. And then, again, you can still try this to reduce things for some of the, what we call summer flood mosquitoes, which are also out now because of the higher temperatures and the rains and things like that. And if you've identified, some spots, you can probably reduce, continual hatching and things like that. But it's a little trickier. The mosquito control districts, again, they hit the spring stuff, fairly heavy, but and they'll continue with the BTI use, like in, let's say, flooded roadside ditches, right? These things happen after a big, somebody went dim, or did I go dim? Or maybe it's the screen. My screensaver. Anyway, you can still use those things during the summer, but it's usually in combination with some of the adulticide, the more typical spraying, for adults. So it's difficult unless you can time your application of the BTI, to hit the larval habitats at the right time. Then you're almost always going to be dealing with, influxes of adults. So I'm not sure that was a clear answer, but
That's helpful.
But it's complicated. I personally recommend the BTI stuff if you can get it ahead of time. But once you've reached the point where there are adult mosquitoes swarming around, you don't have much choice.
What other questions do people have? Go ahead and unmute yourself, Athena.
Well, I'm very concerned about ticks, and that's why my whole landscaping projects have been turned upside down, because I decided I wanted to get herbaceous plants and trees that deter ticks. I got Lyme disease last June, and ever since I really kind of paranoid about all the squirrels and chipmunks, and I got diatomaceous earth and natural oils and that sort of thing. And I bought myself a complete hazmat suit of insecticide infused clothing and hats and socks. And I've lost my joy and spontaneity of making resolve. So I'm wondering, if I could deter it as much as possible. And I wondered if what the thinking is on that, especially ecologically, and creating community to, not just tackling it in an allopathic medicine way and killing them, but trying to prevent
right
the ecology.
Yeah, so not my complete area of expertise, but I can tell you that the people in the tick research world are wrestling with the same things that you are. It's a really difficult problem to try to control, and so there are some pesticide based applications that can reduce things, but since you're looking at the black-legged tick, your goal is to kind of reduce your exposure to wooded areas, right? I mean, I don't want to alarm you, but we've actually found them in the lawns of people, where they not necessarily should be all the time, but their main habitat is wooded areas and leaf litter and things like that. They don't like open lawns, and that's kind of, it's not my idea of a great backyard, but if there is, I like wooded areas, so I have them on my property, but the black-legged ticks in here yet. I only have to deal with the dog ticks, so it's not that bad. But for now, I don't. My understanding is that there's no real good method unless you have somebody come in and spray those areas. And again, it will kill other arthropods and things like that. But you can, again, if you if you stay on mowed trails, or, trails with mulch or wood chips or something like that, you don't, because they kind of hang on the vegetation, right, to grab you. It's not like they're wandering around in the roots of grass or something like that normally and then jump up on you, or they don't fall out of trees. It's just, you have to brush up against them. The standard method for assessing ticks is to take a piece of cloth and drag it, right? You drag a piece of cloth along the edge of the trail, and then the ticks, which are like hanging on, they climb up to the top of a little foliage or something, and a foot or so up, and then they latch on to whatever brushes up against them. So if you can avoid that sort of thing, you should avoid your exposure to tick. And again, since I know you guys are in an area, and it's unfortunate that Okemos now has black-legged ticks basically along the river, and anyway, there are other places too. You're going to have to deal with them, and I think so avoid, again, if you can avoid working in kind of vegetated wooded areas and that sort of thing.
My area.
And then you're just yeah, I know. It's a terrible. Again, I know the people who work on them are wrestling with this right now. There's research going into trying to. So mice actually, deer mice and other things are kind of the major hosts for these things. And so if you can get rid of your mice, that's one thing. You may not want to do that. Or they're trying to use baits that the mice pick up, take back to their nests, and then they're insecticide impregnated, right? And so they kill the ticks that are on the mice and, stop the cycle there. But they're really, I think there was a study out east. I mean, you'd think the people out east would know what to do, right? They've had Lyme disease for many, many more, decades longer than, we've been dealing with it. And as far as I know, they don't have a, really good strategy. I know there have been studies done where they try to keep the deer out and do something with the mice, and then but then if you looked at the overall incidence of Lyme disease afterwards, there wasn't a clear effect. So it's a really, really difficult thing, I guess, is what the take-home point here is, in that your approach. I mean, wearing a hazmat suit. This is what my girlfriend does when she goes out to collect ticks. One of the worst places in the Lansing area is Fenner Arboretum, which is a park in Lansing. It's just loaded, it's loaded with ticks. So if you want to get some, just walk out there. I mean, they're even, I guarantee you they're worse than at your neighborhood. But anyway, I'm sorry, that was a long answer, and I'm not a tick expert, but let me offer my sympathy to you, because everybody is dealing with this.
I just want to say, I read recently a new study, I wish I had cited it, that areas that have, I guess they're the Japanese honeysuckle trees that are invasive that we all see everywhere, have at least 10 times as many nymph ticks because the deer are attracted to them. And so that's one inspiration. I was not going to get rid of mine because I didn't want to have an empty backyard where they've all, planted themselves. But when I read that, I decided it's time to get rid of them.
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with that particular study. The nipple ticks actually come off of the mice. But the deer are important in restarting the cycle. That's usually where the adults breed, and so they take their final meal off of a deer or a larger mammal, and then they lay their eggs, and then that gets into the cycle. So that's probably what's happening there. Anyway, I'm not sure about I'm sure that if we got rid of all of our deer, that would help, immensely. But I don't see a practical, I don't see a practical solution to that. So anyway, so if that works for you, getting rid of the invasive honeysuckle, great. But frankly, I'd be surprised if it got rid of all your ticks.
I agree.
I've seen a couple of articles about targeting the larval stage of the tick, or the nymph, on the mice by taking essentially dryer lint, spraying it with a pyrethrin, allowing it to dry.
Yep.
And then you stuff it into like a paper towel tube. And then you place these in areas where mice will travel, and they tend to wiggle their way through, and it actually treats the mice themselves with the pyrethrin and kills the tick.
Bryce, could you
At
repeat
that
that?
stage.
I missed what you said. What did you say you would start with?
Dryer lint, something very light and fluffy.
Oh,
Then you spray it with a
Yeah.
pyrethrin, you allow it to dry, and then you can stuff it into a tube that's attractive for mice to crawl through. I've never tried it
Yep,
myself. I don't know how effective it is, but
That's so again, people have tried that, with various degrees of success in again, not my area of literature, and being retired, I've kind of lost track of, it's one of the joys of retirement. I don't have to read scientific literature all the time anymore. Anyway, so those have been tried, and so I know there are some studies that have shown that they've been effective in certain areas, and people are still looking into that. But I don't know that, again, I don't know of a widespread study where they've used that and then traced that back to the actual disease transmission dynamics, because you again, if you got rid of the mice and the deer in your area, that would be the way to get rid of the ticks for sure. They wouldn't as soon as they came back though. I'm sure they'd pick that up, but yeah, these strategies, the pyrethroid baited thing, and it will take a while for that to come into effect. Again, I'm thinking of some studies in Wisconsin where they've shown reduction but not elimination. So anyway, whatever helps. Sorry.
One of the things that we wondered was if we were to encourage and make bat houses, is that a helpful thing for dealing with mosquitoes in the area? Like, does that work enough to make it worthwhile?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So I'm a big fan. I like bats. I think they're cool. But really, there's almost none. So the answer is no. It wouldn't, except maybe in an extremely local. I think somebody showed that they cut down on the West Nile vector. If you put the bats right above like a breeding site for mosquitoes, or if the bat house, but in general, the overall bats do not control mosquitoes. There's just there's some the paper. I actually familiar with the paper that started some of this. It was a paper in the American Midland Naturalist that showed how many mosquitoes a bat could eat per night, right? So everything kind of got amplified up from that. I said, oh, a bat could eat like 1,000 mosquitoes, blah blah blah, in 3 hours or something like that. And the answer is that they could maybe, if that's all that was there, or that you fed them. But they eat they're eating other things. So mosquitoes aren't the only thing out there, and so they eat other insects, right? And there's just so many mosquitoes that even if they got rid of half of them, you'd still have. But my understanding is that bats have actually no, you would not notice the effect. Other people really like bats, have contended otherwise. So I don't think it would hurt, but I bet you. I mean, I have bats on my property, Maybe not enough. And last year it was horrific. You know, they didn't. You know, there was no. I don't care how many bats you had. So I think that that's essentially a myth. I can't. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say that bats don't eat some mosquitoes and that under some circumstances, you know, they may knock them down a bit, but believe me, on, you know, and on the broader picture with the nuisance mosquitoes that we have and the swarms of them, yeah, that a couple of bat houses wouldn't help you. I'm sorry to say. I mean, I think they're cool. Put them up, put them up. But you know, they eat beneficial insects as well. You know, so it's bats are kind of indiscriminate. You know, when they go after things. So. Anyway, sorry.
How about any other comments or observations or questions from maybe if you haven't had a chance to speak yet, or even if you have? Go ahead, Athena.
I'm just wondering about diatomaceous earth and herbaceous oils. I read that putting diatomaceous earth around your foundation is likely to, one back to ticks, likely to deter ticks, and around your windowsills. And to deter mice in the fall, I infuse cotton balls with cinnamon oil and peppermint oil. My house smelled phenomenal. And I didn't around the windowsills in my basement, and any potential holes where they could come in that I could find. And I didn't have any. I had one mouse last year, but I didn't have any this past year.
Wow. Sorry. What oils do you use?
Cinnamon oil.
Cinnamon
and peppermint oil. And together,
wow. Huh, I'll have to try that.
yeah.
Yeah. I have a big mouse problem. So yeah. I keep catching them in live traps and then releasing them miles away, and I swear they come back. But I'll have to try.
It's also supposed to deter. It's also supposed to deter spiders.
Oh, huh. Interesting. Okay, that would make more sense. But anyway, so the diatomaceous earth. I'm not an expert on what that does. Again, it's kind of a general thing that would irritate and affect a lot of different arthropods. I assume spiders would fit in that category too. But my initial understanding of the use of that, they use it against cockroaches and you know, ants. So they pick it up and it, you know, it irritates anything with an exoskeleton and that sort of thing. So if I think it's a good strategy, you know, it's fairly innocuous stuff other than for the you know, insects that tend to pick it up. I don't know. I'm trying to think if people have used that with ticks in a more natural setting. I mean, so the ticks aren't necessarily coming into your house unless they're on the mice, right? I guess that's what you're getting at by talking about the whole prevention thing. So if the mice have ticks on them, picking up the diatomaceous, I suppose it would work. And I think I'm trying to remember if there's been some application of it in like along woodland trails and things like that, you know, where you might tend to pick up ticks. And the answer is I don't know. But again, I'm sorry, I don't get deep into the tick literature, so I haven't looked into that. Again, I'm pretty sure it hasn't been used for mosquito control.
What does your girlfriend do with ticks? You said your girlfriend's an expert on tick prevention, or?
Yeah, she's a professor at MSU, and yeah, you've probably seen her on the local news or whatever. She basically studies the distribution, how the black-legged tick is moving through Michigan and elsewhere, and looking at some of the disease. She and her students are looking at some of the diseases that they transmit, which is, you know, again, I'm a mosquito guy, and I'll say right now that I think we have more to worry about disease-wise from ticks in Michigan, although you can take antibiotics and get rid of most of the ticks. I don't know about your case, but they are susceptible to antibiotics, and some of the mosquito diseases are very few and far between. But if you get them and you're susceptible, I'm a mosquito guy, so I'm probably biased, but I think I'd rather be bitten by a tick than a mosquito carrying Eastern equine encephalitis. So anyway, but your chances of, anyway, ticks are definitely the story, in terms of, well, because they're moving in, they're getting, more abundant in many places, and they have their percent infectiveness for Lyme disease and other diseases. There are obviously other diseases that can transmit, is higher than, most mosquito stuff. I didn't,
There's
be
a
careful.
20% There's a 20% miss rate with of antibiotics. About 80% are taken care of within the window if you've within 36 hours if you get it. But 20% are missed. And a lot of that becomes chronic and long-term and, can be very, very bad in a lot of ways, chronic.
Right. Yep.
And there are two schools of thought. One, allopathic medicine, which says, let's kill it with antibiotics. And then you have the functional doctors who are getting involved, who are seeing this as much more long-term, kind of like long-term COVID. So it's still something that is a lot to learn about. So.
Right. Yep. Well,
Isn't there also a minimum amount of time that the tick has to be attached before it will transmit the Lyme disease? So if you're rigorous in your protocols, as soon as you go out or as soon as you come in from out in the woods, you strip down, you check yourself over to see if you've picked up any ticks, and if you get them off within, say, 24 hours or something like that, the chances of the Lyme disease being transmitted are very, very low.
Yeah, that's true. I think that in overall, that's kind of there are many things you can do to try to reduce being bitten by a tick, but for Lyme disease, you're absolutely right. It takes, I think, a minimum of 24 hours for the bacterium to get transferred. It's got to go through the salivary glands. Some of the other diseases, however, anaplasma, other bacterial diseases, don't take as long, and ticks do transmit some viruses occasionally. So, so the feeding time is much shorter, for those. But for Lyme disease, anyway, my girlfriend says 36 hours, but whatever, 24. But the problem is the nymphs are the problem with the Ixodes. And they're really small. I picked up one several years ago, and I had, I can't remember. It was just like serendipity that I found it. It's just so what the heck? Anyway, it's and if you live in an area and you have to do that every night, I can see how you'd miss it. But yes, check yourself. Check. And the other one of the nice things is that the nymphs generally aren't, we're kind of hitting the season right now, like when the nymphs are most active, in through midsummer, but they taper off, and, there's less risk at the end of the summer and into the fall. Then you start running into the adults, coming out. So it's nice that they're not, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year risk. There are some days you can relax. Hiking in the snow is great.
Got it in March. Early March, hiking in the snow. My doctor found a big one on my neck. Yeah, he couldn't believe it.
Wow. Okay. Well,
it caused this irritation, and he said, "My God, this is a tick." So they really have a longer period of time, and they can live in really cold weather.
Yeah. Okay. So I was being too broad in that, but yes, if you have warm days, you know, and there's snow on the ground. Yes, you can have them in February. I think we, you know, found them, you know, warms up in February, but I guess I meant, you know, nice, cold, snowy day, you know, for that. So anyway,
So-
yeah, sorry you had to deal with it.
So
It
I'm
seems like,
curious if, oh, go ahead, John.
go ahead, Sarah.
Mine's really fast. If bats aren't killing mosquitoes, what is the main, what is its main prey? What is the main thing that is eating a mosquito?
Yeah, well, my opinion is a lot of things that just aren't keeping, you know, so controlling the populations, you know, there's, so the first thing starts with, there are, you know, many things that eat the larvae, you know, so the, you know, other aquatic insects eat the larvae. Dragonflies actually eat them as adults and as when they're in the aquatic stage as well. So that's an example, but there are many things. You know, small fish. So you almost never find good populations of mosquitoes in a pond or situation where you have small fish around. You know, in fact, they use small fish as mosquito control. You know, there's something called mosquito fish, and you know, you can actually buy them. So it starts at the larval stage, or, you know, the larvae are just delicious, evidently. You know, some other mosquitoes eat mosquito larvae. So, so that's the first stage. When they get out, you know, so there's, you know, I mean, birds eat them, you know, again, bats will eat them, but nothing really, you know, when they come out in such huge numbers, there's just not much that, you know, effectively keeps them down. I mean, there are other, let me think about this. So what are used? I mean, you know, so purple martins, dragonflies, but they're, you know, again, those are kind of day feeders. And guess when most mosquitoes are out, you know, after day, you know, and stuff. So there's not, you know, I can't think of a lot. Again, I can't think of a lot that, except in the larval stage, that are used for effective control. So when they get into these, you know, swarms of adults, it's just, I'm probably missing something, you know, out there that, but things that eat them just don't seem to be able to keep down these, you know, huge populations. And I think it's, I mean, it's partly because of, you know, the times when mosquitoes are active and potential visual predators are also active. And because if there were, you know, I guess we'd have, you know, good populations, or we'd be knocking down the populations. I wish there were. You know.
It seems like mosquitoes like some people more than others for some reason. Why would that be? Or is that just our imaginations?
No, it's not your imagination. And the basis is, it all starts with CO2. So your respiration. So that's their first cue, you know, they look at. And so, you know, I think it's been shown some people, you know, maybe respire more, or, you know, putting off, you know, that cue. So they come onto that. But then it's an issue of body odors. And so I'm not saying, you know, non-hygienic, you know, issues or whatever. It's just, you know, you have skin oils and bacteria on your skin and that sort of thing. And there's some compounds, you know, that are attracted to mosquitoes, and particularly the ones that are looking for mammals versus, you know, other hosts and things like that. And there are, you know, the mosquitoes that have evolved with humans, the ones that, you know, transmit some of the, you know, really nasty disease, they tend to like to feed on humans, right? So they've learned to, you know, cue in on, you know, human primate specific, you know, skin odors. So it's a matter. So first it's CO2, a little bit of heat. There's some visual stuff for some of them, but it's mainly smell, chemical, odor. You know, okay, I'm in the right place. And then, you know, then they get close. Oh yeah, I'm really in the right place. I'm going to start probing and, you know, take a meal. So yep. And there are differences, you know, between people. Yep. We've seen that, you know, different students that I sent out to, you know, assess I make them do what we call landing rates. You go out and then you sit there and then you count the number of mosquitoes that land on you and try to suck them up. I mean, it's a measure of mosquito activity, right? It's one of the best ones. How many mosquitoes are attacking you at any time, and it can they could be sitting within 10 feet of one another, and one will get a whole bunch, and the next one won't. So anyway, yep.
I bet you don't get many volunteers for that activity.
Yeah, it had to be kind of a compulsory class, exercise. Yep.
One of the comments that was offered by, I believe it was Katie, who helps run the nature center, is just proper dressing and then treating your clothing rather than your skin with mosquito control.
Permethrin. Yeah. Or with some of the other repellents. Yeah, so that usually means that you have to wear long pants and long sleeve stuff, and that's okay if you want to do that. But I'm kind of a t-shirt and shorts guy, so I'll spray it on my skin. And there are a lot of, if you don't like the deep base products, the off compounds, which are still fairly effective. There are a lot of more. There's a really good lemon eucalyptus oil based product. I'm not sure, if that's Repel, or I can't remember who manufactures that, but they're as good or almost as good as a deep base repellent, and probably more acceptable to spraying it on your skin and stuff like that. Yep. But I use last year, wow, I had a can of repellent sitting out, as I left my went out to my garage, spray myself, go and walk outside with the dog. And this year not so bad. They don't seem as bad.
I heard that for ticks, my physician told me, and I read this several other places, I don't know how true it is, that if you eat a lot of garlic, you will emit an odor that is not attractive to ticks or other living creatures. But ticks in particular do not like that. I don't know how true that is.
Yeah. I'm not sure about ticks. I don't think so. I'd be really surprised. And we actually did a small scale study against mosquitoes. That's people have said that for a long time that garlic. In fact, I think there are even companies that have manufactured spray your yard with garlic and keep the mosquitoes away. And who knows? Maybe there's some truth to that. But ingesting it, like having it ooze, the garlic ooze out of your skin. Or something like that. No evidence. We there's a product that they give us money to do this. I guess we got paid something to test this. And this is where I was doing the landing rate studies that I described, with students. And so they would take a garlic pill, like 2 hours, 1 or 2 hours. I can't remember. It had to be a certain length of time before they went out of the woods. And it made absolutely no difference. This guy had garlic and he was still getting eaten alive, by mosquitoes. And we switched them up and did all this, stuff. It was whatever. Maybe it was this particular product, but so I don't have a lot of faith in garlic against mosquitoes. I don't know personally about ticks, but my girlfriend eats a lot of garlic, and she's still. I don't think it works. So anyway. I don't know.
We have about 5 more minutes. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
I just wanted to say we got about 5 more minutes. Try and wrap this up in about an hour. But any other last questions? It's been a rich conversation. Thank you so much for being here, and Bruce for inviting Michael. And if you have suggestions for future speakers or topics, we try and do one more expert a month, or one specific topic a month, even though topics will range broadly from week to week. So come back again, Mike, if you feel like it. Any other parting
Okay,
comments?
yeah, it was fun. It was
Question?
great. I hope it was valuable.
It's fascinating.
Sorry?
Maybe we can
Yeah,
invite
okay.
your girlfriend to talk with us about
I was gonna
ticks.
say, if you want to hear about ticks, maybe I'll ask. And so where are you located? Where's your neighborhood actually? I don't.
Indian Lakes.
Oh, it's in. Oh my gosh. Okay, well then you live right across the street, you know, from my girlfriend. So she lives.
Oh,
in-
really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah,
you guys are
yeah.
dealing with oh my goodness. Okay, well that. Huh. Interesting. Okay. Should have known. Indian, yeah. Well, actually, you have. Do you know Ned Walker? Does that ring a bell?
No, I don't. Mm-mm.
Okay. All right. Well, he's a more serious mosquito expert than I am, and I think he lives in your neighborhood. So,
Oh,
so anyway,
Maybe
well, it was good. Fun to talk with you. I hope I answered some of your questions anyway, and you know, contact me if you have anything more specific. So,
thank you, Bruce. You want to make any parting comments, Bruce?
Well, I just, it was fascinating, and I enjoyed listening to your answers and your stories. I really appreciate your coming here, and I'll pass your greetings along to Caitlin.
please say hi. Yeah, where did you know? I kind of lost track of her. Did she do her master's at MSU?
No, she went to Ohio State, and she actually was working on regional differences in mosquito diapause. And
Yeah.
looking at that
Yeah.
as a possible control measure. So it was,
So I've been there before. Yeah. Trying to remember the person. Do you know who was her major advisor? Do you know?
I don't remember her last name.
I know that. Yeah. She's a fairly recent hire, I think. And
Yes.
took over
Yep.
for, gosh, the guy's name who did the diapause stuff. It's escaping me right now. But anyway, yes, okay. Well, good for her. I'm glad she did that. So,
Yep.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you much. And good luck with your mosquitoes. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
All right. See you next
Okay.
week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.